Alright, welcome back to Honored Madmen, and today we're going to be talking about Justified. So, this show has been one of my favorites for a long time, since its original run. I've rewatched it countless times. I love the characters, Boyd Crowder, Raylan Givens, Wynn Duffy. The only season I really don't like is Season 5 because of course, Michael Rappaport. But besides him, it's still a pretty solid season. Now, recently, FX did City Primeval, which is sort of a spin-off. It's another adaptation of an Elmore Leonard novel, which Justified was also inspired by. This time it's a novel that didn't feature Raylan, it featured a different character, but basically Raylan takes his place in this one. It basically drops Raylan into a pretty much unfamiliar environment, the city of Detroit, where he has to navigate its underworld, the corrupt cops, and a certain madman by the name of Clement Manzel. Manzel. Now, when I heard about this show, I was very excited because I love Justified, but when it actually came out and I watched the first couple episodes, I was sort of underwhelmed, which, I guess that's fine. I guess maybe I was hyping it up or expecting too much. I get it, Raylan's older now, he's not going to be the same exact guy he was in the regular Justified. He's not living in Kentucky, he hasn't seen Boyd in years because, Boyd's in prison. He's got a teenage daughter now, played by his actual daughter, Timothy Oliphant's daughter, which is something that a lot of people had a problem with, mainly because the acting wasn't too great. And I do agree it could have been better, but she wasn't really in that much of it, so it's not that big of a deal to me. There were other things I focused on a lot more than that were, in my opinion, problematic. Or does that word even have the same meaning anymore? Does that just mean racist? That's not how I'm meaning. I just mean that I took issues with some of the other things way more than I took issues with her acting. I was expecting Raylan to be the best part of the series, but he really didn't get to do much until the very end. Honestly, the best part about this miniseries is the antagonist, the white stripe singing madman Clement Manzel, played by Boyd Holbrook. This guy was great. He felt like a classic Justified villain. He's sort of like a Justified version of a Fargo-style Lorne Malvo type of character, especially in the final episode. He basically was the perfect, foil for Raylan. A more modern style of outlaw with a uncanny sense of luck. And I like that they changed him from his book counterpart, who was basically just a straight up racist. In this show, he's actually a lot more nuanced and, in my opinion, quite likable, especially when compared to some of these other characters that this show introduced. Because it would have been way too easy to just make him a cartoonish, over-the-top racist southerner. I'm honestly surprised that the showrunners didn't just do that, because plenty of their other characters are basically cartoonish stereotypes, or not really stereotypes, but just cartoonish over-the-top characters, like the judge we meet at the beginning. And also that lawyer in the beginning too. She proudly defends a guy who tried to carjack a U.S. Marshal and then got bested by said Marshal. And the spiteful judge has Raylan and his daughter held in contempt of court. Honestly, the whole thing was a circus. That was probably one of my least favorite parts about the whole show, and I guess it's trying to depict that the system in Detroit is, fucked, to the surprise of absolutely no one. Basically spelling it out to Raylan like, oh, you thought it was bad where you were at? Look how bad it is here. Everything's corrupt and everybody makes every little thing racial. Look at all the cop characters too. First of all, we've got the we own this city style excessive force type of dude. Then we've got the straight-laced cop who offers Raylan a place to stay and has a family who actually turns out to be corrupt. And the we own the city guy turns out to be kind of good. He actually gives Raylan the information he needs when the other cop tries to cover it up. I'm getting ahead of myself, but those cops, they were interesting. They were cool. I didn't really have too much of a problem with them, but I guess that's what I'm saying. This show spent a lot of time developing its setting when it really didn't need to, because we weren't going to be ever spending more than 8 episodes here. And I know the setting was a big part of what made Justified so unique and so cool, was it had this unique setting. We were constantly learning more about this backwoods Kentucky, what a holler is. I only know what a holler is because of Kentucky. I later watched Banshee, and I think they talk about that there too, or rather what those are, but you get what I mean. And I get that they were trying to do something similar with City Primeval, like establishing just exactly how ridiculous Detroit is, but they really could have done that in a less is more style way, because we really got not very much of Raylan in the first few episodes, and yeah, the final episode is definitely the best of this entire series. Like I said, in everything leading up to the final episode, the only interesting stuff to me was the stuff that featured Boyd Holbrook's character, Clement Manzel, just because I found him very likable, very entertaining. The girlfriend character of his was also kind of entertaining. She was a complete idiot, and I think she wasn't the best representation of somebody who has an excessive weed problem, but who knows? I guess we're all different, right? She could be an accurate representation to somebody, just not to me. I did kind of find her likable, though. I mean, like I said, she was really dumb, but kind of endearing. Like, the actress did a good job in making the character likable and making me not actually hate the character when a lesser actress could have easily made this character very hateable. But I mainly want to talk about the last episode anyway, because if you're watching this video, you've probably watched all the episodes. You guys don't need me to recap everything that happened in the series. Oh wait, before I go into that, I liked the character of Sweetie too. I can't believe I forgot about him, but he was really good. I really liked his dynamic with Clement, because you could see that Clement really did like Sweetie, and Sweetie was just super nervous and on edge every time he was around Clement. I mean, I've been around unhinged people before. I know the feeling. I mean, no one as unhinged as Clement, but I definitely felt where Sweetie was coming from. I mean, he's an old weed dealer. He just wants a peaceful, quiet life. And I really, really liked their final scene together, Clement and Sweetie. Clement finally shows him his cover of Seven Nation Army. And Sweetie's like, man, you expect me to go out listening to this crack of music? And then basically tells Clement, like, hey, you're going to have to look me in the eyes if you're going to kill me. So Clement shoots him not in the head, shoots him like in the chest or something like that, makes Sweetie close his eyes. And then as the old man's laying there bleeding out, Clement's looking into his eyes the entire time, and you can tell that this unhinged murderer madman, Clement Mansell, was actually shaken up by this death. This is actually the only murder we see him commit that actually appears to have affected him in any negative way. You can tell it really bummed him out that Sweetie betrayed him. I mean, that's the thing with Mansell. He constantly does all this crazy shit, forcing everybody around him to constantly betray him for their own safety. And then he gets mad that, that they did that to him, and he's sad when he kills them, but he still kills them. And again, he kills countless people throughout this series without blinking an eye. But it was just really interesting how much murdering Sweetie appears to have affected him. Also, speaking of people's actions having effect on others, I mean, look what happens to the blonde girl's roommate. She gets her teeth ripped out of her head by Albanian gangsters because of Mansell and her actions. That's one thing Justified always illustrated well and was conveyed well in this series. But I keep getting off topic. Let's go back to talking about the finale. So this episode, in my opinion, was really fucking good. Like, good enough to have carried the entire series. Not saying all the episodes previously were bad, Some of them were pretty good. Some of them were decent. Some of them were really slow and pointless. Like, the big thing is that this would have been probably like a 3 or 4 episode arc if it had been a part of the main series of Justified. And because of that, it does feel like it was like dragged out into 8 episodes. But this last one, the finale, it redeems it, in my opinion. It doesn't excuse all the flaws of the previous episodes or the pacing and all that. It doesn't excuse all that, but it makes all of it worth watching because all of that does build up into this, this final moment. And if you're a big fan of the original Justified, it has a really big twist at the end that you probably know by now. But let's run through the events of the finale. So, the Albanians do a straight-up Dr. Evil style death scenario for Clement Mansell. They lock him in a room and he's supposed to just eventually die in there, I guess. Which is weird because I imagine Raylan and Carolyn, when they made this deal with the Albanians to trade Mansell to them, I'm assuming that they figured the Albanians would just shoot him and be done with it. That they wouldn't do this weird, extravagant death thing. But they're like, whatever, they go home. And Clement, of course, manages to escape because the kid Skender, who we met earlier on, basically, Clement's woman had been seducing him so that her and Clement could rob him. This guy wanted to go kill Clement himself. And of course, our good old honored madman Clement gets over on him and beats him to death and escapes, and then goes to the hospital and goes full-on Joel from Last of Us on the hospital and kills all the Albanians that are working there because they're basically using this retirement home as a front, basically, for their base of operations. And yeah, Mansell goes down there and kills every last one of them and then heads to the lawyer's house where he finds Raylan waiting for him. Now here we get to see one of the best examples of Boyd Holbrook's acting that I've ever seen, because throughout the show he goes into all these little monologues and stories and we never really know if he's just bullshitting or if he's telling the truth, and he even says that to one of the people that he's telling one of the stories to. In this case, he talks about how his dad used to play with Waylon Jennings until his mom ran him off or something or other, which sort of brings me back to why he liked Sweetie, because Sweetie played with, Jimi Hendrix? I can't remember who he played with because it's been a while since I saw that episode, but he really liked that about Sweetie. This guy has a thing for music. But yeah, he goes on to say his dad supposedly played with Waylon Jennings and that he has the same DNA as his dad. He is the same. That's why he's got the music in his blood, of course. I imagine, though, that for Raylan, Mansell's long-winded stories like this sort of remind him of Boyd. They have to in some way. I mean, this guy is a completely different character than Boyd, but at the same time, he's very similar in many ways. He's sort of like almost an antithesis, if that's the right word, to Boyd. In many ways, Boyd was like a gentleman outlaw, and this guy is sort of like the unhinged chaos type of guy. They're operating with completely different playbooks, but they do have a similar knack for their stories and the way they like to talk. But yeah, after telling his story, Clement says he's got to go, but he's going to give Raylan something to remember him by, and he reaches into his back pocket, but before he could pull out anything, he's lit up by Raylan. Raylan shoots him probably 3 or 4 times. And what's funny about Clement is he looks genuinely surprised by this. He's like, man, you fucking shot me. And he pulls out the cassette tape with his cover of White Stripes' Seven Nation Army. So basically, Raylan's killing isn't necessarily justified. I mean, the guy was breaking and entering. He broke into his lawyer's place, and he was armed, so Raylan wasn't necessarily unjustified in the eyes of the law, but maybe he was unjustified in his own eyes. Because the guy wasn't drawn on him, he just sort of straight up murdered him. And honestly, Raylan's the type of guy who goads people into drawing on him. You know what I mean? He likes when they draw on him just so he can feel justified when he kills him. And this time, this guy, he wasn't actually drawn on him, so that actually does bother Raylan. I mean, Raylan's, like I said, he's killed many guys, usually after antagonizing them to draw on him. And he does that without batting an eye, and he has no problem with it. But this time, this one was different. He wasn't actually justified. So after all the dust settles, he goes back to Miami. He goes to one of his boss's retirement parties, and we see that big obnoxious guy from Anchorman who played a marshal, and he has a reference to his episode in the OG series where he told his daughter, business school. We basically get a nice callback to all that. We don't get to see Art or any of the people from Harlan. And Raylan basically tells his boss that he retires, that he quits after this. He's done. Now he can actually spend time with his daughter and live a life outside of law enforcement. Plus, maybe he figured it was about time after finally shooting a guy who wasn't actually drawn on him. It's kind of tough to say. But now we get to the best part. After showing Raylan's little scene with his daughter and his ex-wife Winona, who also cameoed in this episode, the screen cuts to Tramble County Lockup in Kentucky. And if you're a fan of Justified, you already know where this is going. We soon see Boyd Crowder himself, played by the always great Walton Goggins. We basically see that for the past 10 years, he's been doing exactly what we saw him doing last at the end of Justified, being a preacher and corralling inmates into his flock, something that he's known for. Now, we see him telling his flock that his health has been in decline as of late, and that he's going to be transferred to a hospital to figure out what's wrong with him. Now, after this, we begin to see Boyd Crowder slowly shed the veneer of his preacher personality and reverting back into his old classic outlaw persona, his true form, if you will. And during the transfer, he makes a whole lot of noise, forcing the drivers to pull over, and then we learn that this whole thing was an elaborate planned escape for Boyd when the female guard turns the gun on her partner, Luis Guzman, who they then lock in the prison van and depart together to parts unknown. We then see Boyd once again in one of his classic vests and the prison guard lady discussing where they're going to go next, and they decide on Mexico. And then they promptly hop in the car and ride off into the sunset. Honestly, that was the ending I've always wanted for Boyd. I always thought that he got a really bum deal at the end of Justified. Yeah, he was a criminal. I mean, look what Raylan does. That's basically kind of criminal too. It's just the other side. The duality of those two was always the best part of that show because, Boyd was a criminal with morals, and Raylan was this lawman who liked to goad people into shooting at him so he could kill them. I always thought what Raylan did in the 6th season with that lawyer forcing Ava when there was no real evidence against her, no reason they should have been able to force Ava to go undercover and testify against Boyd and do all that shady shit they did in the last season. Honestly, the last season isn't the best when it comes to Justified. The first half of it's pretty good with the mercenaries, but I never really fully understood what dirt they had on Ava to force her to go undercover and wear a wire against Boyd and all that. It just seemed really messy. It really felt like there was supposed to be 7 seasons instead of 6, and that's why it's all weird. Anyway, though, I don't know if this means they're going to do another season of Justified or maybe a season focused solely on Boyd, and at the end of that is when Raylan decides he needs to go after him, because the way they have it set up, Raylan ignores the call that was telling him about Boyd's escape, and Boyd basically just rides off into the sunset. I mean, it could just end there and I'd be happy because, at least he gets his freedom. But I highly doubt they're going to do it that way, and they're probably just going to do another season of Justified, and it's going to end with one of these guys killing the other one, and that's really fucking stupid. But who knows, maybe they'll just do a season just about Boyd, and we just get to see his exploits in Mexico. Honestly, who knows at this point. I just really wanted to do a video about this because I fucking loved Justified's original run, and I was really, at least at the beginning, underwhelmed by this season of Justified. But I think the ending really picked it up for me. I mean, maybe I'm biased because I think Boyd Crowder is one of the best characters to ever grace the silver screen, and just seeing that character again made it all worthwhile, and seeing him get an ending I can deem satisfactory was really nice, even though I feel like maybe they could have had him play some kind of bigger part in this season, maybe just show his life in prison. But I mean, I like how, as it is, I like how they did it. I mean, it seems that nothing much has changed since we last saw Boyd. I mean, we saw him as a preacher, and when it picked up, he was a preacher again. He shed that persona like the chameleon that he's always been, and he gets to ride off like the outlaw he was born to be. I do wish we got to see Win Duffy, but I mean, there's really no reason for him to pop back up. He rode off into the sunset at the end of the original one with all the money. He's very likely surfing on a beach somewhere. I can't remember what they said, but it's believed he's surfing on a beach somewhere, maybe in Hawaii or in Laos or Cambodia. Honestly, I'm bad with geography, but if I had to rate the series as a whole, I'd give it a solid 7.2. If I were to just rate the final episode, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. It was solid. The main story was great, and all the cameos were handled good, and that little ending part, man, that really drove it over the top for me. But like I said, maybe I'm biased because I really like the character. But let me know what you guys think if you watched it, and I hope you guys found this at least somewhat entertaining or amusing at the very least. We've got our next big lore video, well, not really super big, but the next lore video is going to be about Grey Rat the Thief, everybody's favorite loyal sidekick from Dark Souls 3. That should be done soon. But at the risk of rambling any longer than I'd planned to, let's have our outro, and then we'll be out of here. At the end of the day, I agree with a lot of the complaints about this show. Raylan's relationship with the lawyer seemed pretty forced and out of nowhere, and really not in line with the type of women we've seen him go after. And I'm not saying that because, she's a big black woman or anything. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, even in the context of their interactions between each other in the show, it never really seemed like that's the route they were going for. I mean, I kind of did say early on, they're probably going to, jokingly, that Raylan's going to bang the lawyer, but that's just because I imagine Raylan to bang everybody. But I was saying it as an over-the-top joke, not as something that was actually going to happen. And then it ended up happening, and I get it. I get a lot of people's criticism with that, but that wasn't really one of my main problems. My main problem was just how wasted big parts of this show just felt. And maybe 7.2 is a little too high, but like I said, I got that Boyd Crowder bias, and honestly, Manzel's character really did carry the show, in my opinion. But yeah, that's my take on Justified City Primeval. Who knows if they're doing more? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Until next time, everybody, thank you for listening to another Honored Madman ramble. Be safe. See ya.